North Korea is warning the U.S. could face what it calls an unimaginable strike at any time. A new statement from Pyongyang criticizes ongoing joint military drills between the U.S. and South Korea. It says the two countries are warmongers and the root cause of a nuclear war. New York Times opinion page columnist Nicholas Kristof spent 5 days inside North Korea and wrote a series of articles about his experiences. He discovered North Korea is galvanizing its people to expect a nuclear war with the U.S. Nicholas joins us here at the table. Good morning.
Good morning.
This is your third trip to North Korea, right?
That's correct.
And so how was this different from what you've seen in the past?
So it was very different. I mean, North Korea is always a bizarre place, and there's always a certain amount of over-the-top rhetoric. But this time, the country has really galvanized for war. There's constant talk about missile attacks on the U.S. There are billboards around the country showing missiles destroying the U.S. Capitol, destroying the U.S. flag. There's discussion about how nuclear war with the U.S. is inevitable, and maybe most striking, about how North Korea will defeat the U.S. in this nuclear war. It's not only survivable, but actually winnable.
They're convinced they would win if a war took place.
Astonishingly, they are convinced that that they would win, and that the U.S. would then retreat ignominiously from the Korean Peninsula, from Japan, from Asia, and Kim Jong-un would unite the Korean Peninsula.
Why are they so confident, Nick?
Well, I mean, of course, it's always very difficult to distinguish what they say versus what they think.
Yeah.
But they have a huge network of underground tunnels and underground fortifications. And their narrative is also that they have repeatedly defeated the U.S. in the Korean War and a series of incidents across the DMZ. And there's always a danger, of course, that dictators come to believe their own propaganda. And I'm nervous that that is what is happening right now.
Were you nervous and afraid while you were there yourself? You had handlers the whole time. It didn't seem like you were able to move freely, as you have been in the past.
That's right. I mean, look, reporting in North Korea, you were always very constrained. But in the past, I was able to stay in the center of the city, in a hotel, to walk around. This time, the North Korean Foreign Ministry had handlers that just clung to me like a limpet. They kept me at a guarded foreign ministry compound in the rice paddies outside of town. And I thought, oh, this is to protect the North Koreans from my vigorous questioning.
Yeah.
But no, it turns out that they were there to protect me from the security services who might not be on board with having an American journalist in town. And that was a little
thinking they could kidnap you and take you.
Yeah, you know, I don't think it was so much that the security forces would suddenly grab me.
You.
I think it was more of a concern that I might engage in some kind of mischief, and then the security forces would grab me, and then there would be a problem.
We know North Korea is probably the biggest national security test that Trump will face. When I was there in May and interviewed President Moon, the president of South Korea, he talked about opening up a bilateral dialogue. Trump talked about that on the campaign. He said sitting knee to knee with the North Korean leader, Kim Jong-un. Any sense that that dialogue can or will happen?
One of the sad things is that the doves, if you will, the people trying to find an exit ramp in North Korea, just like those in Washington, seem to be marginalized. And so the hardliners seem to be ascendant, both in the North Korean capital, Pyongyang, and in Washington. So I was struck that the North Koreans were not very interested in talks.
So that's interesting because, you know, President Obama's policy was one of strategic patience, right? There wasn't this bellicose rhetoric. Some people criticize that as then letting the North Koreans build up this weaponry. But now you have this very tough talk from the president's mouth and on Twitter. How are the North Koreans using that?
So I think that President Trump's talk has been counterproductive. It was striking that the North Koreans are leveraging it for their own propaganda. So your average North Korea knows nothing about Otto Warmbier, for example.
It so surprises me. Yeah,
that doesn't penetrate. They know all about President Trump's threat to totally destroy North Korea, because it fits into their narrative.
But this is the other part of it. We did a story with David Gutenfelder, who was in North Korea dozens of times, and he talked about all of North Korea is not Kim Jong-un. I mean, we're talking about millions of people there, too, who don't know about all of this and wouldn't necessarily agree with what their leader is doing.
You know, it's very hard to know what ordinary North Koreans think, and in North Korea, you don't get a very good sense of that. But I must say, talking to defectors, you get the sense that the mind control, controlling every bit of information, having a speaker in people's homes to bring in propaganda, not having radio dials, that works pretty well to get people to essentially believe in the regime, except closer to the Chinese border. Closer to the Chinese border, they do hear alternative truths, and they begin to question things.
As they try to live their lives avoiding nuclear war.
And we're glad you're back safely, Nicholas.
So am I. So is my wife.
Yes, I'm sure she is.
Thank you, Nick.